we're thinking that we need to, provide all these mechanisms at work to, and avenues for women to have conversations, but we're actually not being supportive about the times in their career and their life journey that it needs to happen, right? And for me, I had a child very late in my career. And, being a C-level woman with a young child, I often get asked, how is it that you're in such a senior role, such a demanding role, and have such a young child? And I often think, would you ever ask a man that question?
Right. Never.
It would
never
come up.
It would never. It's not even a thought that would ever cross anyone's mind. Welcome to the She's So Sweet podcast, where we interview accomplished women who have worked their way to the C-suite. I'm your host, Kristi Faltorusso, Chief Customer Officer and award-winning customer success executive. I am so excited to introduce our guest today, Sunaina Lobo, Chief People Officer at Gong. Hi, Suni. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Kristi. So wonderful to be here with you today.
I am so excited. I think all of our pre-recording chats have gotten me so pumped for this episode. I cannot wait for you to share all of your journey. So before we get in, I want to start by telling folks a little bit more about you and your role at Gong. So let's do that. Let's tell us about your role as Chief People Officer. Share with us a little bit about Gong for those who may not be as familiar.
Sure. One of my favorite things to do. So a Chief People Officer at Gong, I've been here 3 months. It was 3 months last week, and I'm
Congratulations.
Loving it. Thank you. I'm honored to lead the most amazing people team at Gong. And I lead the people and the culture strategy for the organization. For folks who don't know what Gong is and who Gong is, we are the undisputed revenue intelligence leader. And very excited about the company, the people, and the culture at Gong. And my mission is to make Gong a great place to work, along with my team and our fellow Gongsters.
That's so wonderful. I'm so excited to dig more into the role here. So I want to give a little scope of what that looks like at Gong, right? Because Chief People Officer at various companies has different scope, roles, responsibilities. Tell us a little bit about what your organization looks like.
Okay, yeah, that again, one of my favorite things to do. So I look after the people strategy for the company globally. And typically a people team consists of various aspects of whether it's talent acquisition, whether we call them centers of excellence, so talent acquisition, learning and development or talent development, total rewards, how do we compensate our employees, and we think about benefits and well-being, people operations, how do we leverage our HRIS platforms to create a great employee experience for folks who come to the organization. And then finally, we have our mighty HR business partners who work directly with leaders in the organization. I call them, like, you're a salesperson, so I call them our go-to-market arm for all of the wonderful product that the people team develops. But, as I said earlier, our mission is to create a best place to work, to make sure that people feel like they have a strong sense of belonging, they can excel at what they do, they are innovative, and we create an inclusive culture. And I strongly believe that once all those things come together, you create high-performing teams and growth organizations.
I love that so much. And I relate to that. And I actually share the same belief. Now tell me, so you've been there 3 months. What's the standout observation that you've made? So what is something that you think makes Gong a unique place to work?
Oh, without a doubt, our customers. We have this tagline within Gong, raving fans. We like to create raving fans with our customers. And any customer that you speak to, I can be assured of this, will tell you that our product rocks. We're an AI native product. And, ever since our inception about 7 years ago, our product and our platform was an AI native platform. And, today AI is a buzzword, but it's always been part of our DNA. And if you talk to a customer, in fact, about 3 weeks ago, I attended our customer dinner. We host customer dinners in all major cities, and I attended the one in San Francisco. I was sitting next to 4 or 5 customers, and they just couldn't stop raving about the product. And that's the reason why I joined the company. When I did my research, I was like, I have never actually talked to a company where anybody that I talk to in my network, unsolicited, will tell you that it's one of the best products they've used. Now, I'm so excited about that. And what I want to do is create those same raving fans with our employee base. And we are already there. We're a great company, great culture. This is a story of good to great, which is so exciting. It's wonderful to be able to build what we have with our customers internally too.
Well, I have to tell you, I was a customer of Gong's at 3 different companies. And so I used the product very early in its inception. So I've seen the evolution of the product. And you're right, it's so powerful. I don't know that I've ever had a moment using it where I wasn't like, wow, that's so cool, or like learned a new insight because of it. It does bring real value to organizations and people. And especially as a leader, the coaching that you can do with it. I mean, it's just really phenomenal. And I've really enjoyed watching the journey.
Oh wow! It's true. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I should have known that because you're a go-to-market leader. Obviously you'll use our product. We're the best in the industry, so that should have been a given. That's one. But this is exactly what I mean. When I talk to customers unsolicited, anybody that I speak to that uses our product will tell you what a game changer it is. And I love the fact that as a leader you can coach employees because from an HR perspective, from a people standpoint, coaching is such an important thing that we need our managers to do, right? Whether it's in their functional jobs or whether it's around softer skills, it's all about coaching your folks to be the best that they can. So the fact that our platform offers that opportunity for revenue teams, what gets me excited is that I want to expand that to other aspects of our employee life cycle, right? How do you have a great career conversation? How do you have a great performance conversation and make people feel excited? The number of times when I've heard leaders and managers say to me, "Oh, Suni, I need to do a performance review. I don't want to do that." Even if it's a good conversation, they're like, too much time and I have to record the conversation. Well, what if you recorded it in Gong?
Yeah.
And built insights out of that performance conversation, which got automatically translated into your HRIS system. We use Workday. We can, build in a plugin to most HRIS systems. And, you had, like you have with revenue teams, you had highlights from the conversation that linked to your career development plan. All of that done through AI. So that's,
cool.
The world's oyster.
I love that. Okay, I got to call out one more thing. So as a customer success professional, I always advocate that more leaders across the organization should be in touch with our customers. Now, I will tell you, marketing leaders, yes, sales, product, you might be the first chief people officer I've ever spoken to who is also meeting with customers. I just don't see it. So I have to commend you for really helping be a part of that customer centricity in the business, because I just don't see certain leaders in different roles really leaning in that way. So good for you.
It's something I'm really passionate about, Kristi. If we're not talking to our customers, then for me it's like game over. How do I know what customers are saying, what our product is doing? What can we be doing differently, right, at an organizational level? So I see my role as a C-level executive first, and then a people leader, right? So I always call myself an executive and a leader, and I lead from a people and a culture vantage point. But I am an executive of the organization. In fact, I was talking to my CEO yesterday, Amit, and I said, "Hey, I'm going to be on our executive alignment program where we have executives aligned to some of our top customers. And that's a real area of passion for me." And I was like, "What do you think about that?" And he's like, "This is what I love about you, Suni." "What do you mean what I think about it?" "I love that you want to do this, right? That you want to come to our customer dinners, engage with our customers, that you want to be an executive sponsor for our key customers." It's really important, as we build culture in the organization, because happy employees equals happy customers.
It's so true. And I just, kudos to you. And I hope for everybody listening, if you are in a role that doesn't seem obvious that you should be meeting with customers, make it obvious. You should be meeting with your customers. So I love that so much. All right. Well, listen, I know that although this has been a passion of yours and you've been following this journey professionally for a long time, it's probably not what you thought you were going to be when you were younger. So let's wind back the years here, Suni. Tell me, when you were younger, what were your early career aspirations? What did you think you were going to be when you were a little girl?
Yeah, I was thinking about this when you asked me the question. I actually wanted to be, in a people-related function or profession very early in my career. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But, before all of that other stuff, right, before I knew about, the corporate world and all of the goodness that we are in, I wanted to be a musician. Yeah, I loved to sing. I play the piano. I used to sing professionally in my earlier days. And it paid for university, it paid for my living expenses, which was a fantastic way to do it. And my parents really encouraged it. I came from a very musical background, so they really encouraged it. But coming from an Asian background, and I grew up in Mumbai, a small city with 22 million people, my mom said, it's really important for you to learn an instrument, to sing, to do whatever you want to do in the music space, but that's a hobby. Then you get to do your main job. And it's so funny. I mean, I found passion in HR and the people space, and in what I do, I really am passionate about this space. But now, when I think about my young daughter, who's very young and who's very musical, and speaks 3 languages at the age of 2, which is incredible to me.
So wild.
It's so wild. I don't think I was able to speak 1 language. So when she sings, one of the things that always strikes me is I want her to grow up to know that she can be successful in whatever she does. She doesn't need to be in a particular profession or field to feel like she's been successful. I want her to be do whatever she's passionate about, and she will find success there.
I love that so much. I think more parents should embody that message. I think some of us have preconceived notions about what success looks like, right? I know that my family did growing up, right? It was very much like you have to go find a career and a job that's going to afford you to live a life that we envisioned for you, right? And maybe that wasn't through the arts. Now, I wasn't musically inclined, so that was probably not a path I would have explored, but I love that. So I really I'm so proud to hear that that's how you're raising your daughter.
Well, Taylor Swift, great example.
You're right. Listen, her mom is out there just probably so proud that that was the path that she helped support her daughter on.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a funny question here. If you were doing karaoke, what would be the song that you would choose to sing?
We Are the Champions, Queen.
Oh, that's unexpected and solid song choice.
I love it because you can really belch it out, and who doesn't love Queen? Who doesn't love Queen?
It's such a great fun song. And to your point, right? You've never heard anyone like lip sing it or just kind of. It is like a full raise the volume, give it all you got song. So awesome choice. I love that. Okay, so now let's pivot a little bit here. So obviously we didn't become a musician, although you're gonna go back to this hobby at some point, right? We talked about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how did we get from musician to chief people officer? What did that journey look like for you?
Oh, it's such a natural transition.
Very obvious one, right?
Yeah, very obvious. One of the things very early on in my life, I had parents who were in the corporate world and really successful. My dad had a lot of leadership positions, and he led an organization in India. And I used to go into work with him. So I used to drive into work with him, and in his factory they used to manufacture scooters. And I'll never forget how he used to connect with everyone in the factory, right? Whether it was someone at the doorman to someone who was on the factory floor manufacturing product. He knew everything about everyone. When they got married, how many kids they had, what was going on in their lives, if they had any adversity, he'd always check in with people. And that's something that always stayed with me, that he was so well loved. He was beloved by his teams because he really connected with them personally. And they knew that he cared for them personally. It was not just a superficial thing. And it got me interested in, understanding more about people and what makes them tick. And the fact that people are what make organizations, not technology, not product. I know, technology is really important to what we do today, especially in our industries. But people are the ones that are the game changers, right? If you have a good team and you have a dedicated team, you can achieve anything. And I know my dad strongly believed that, and it was something that I watched growing up, and then went into, the evolution, then went into an HR role and into a people role. My initial two degrees were in accounting, though, because again, going back
Wow.
to the Asian background, my parents said, "Oh, you have to do something, but you have to have a professional degree. So you can either
Right.
be an accountant or an engineer or what." And I was like, no, I'll choose the path of least resistance. I'll be an accountant, and then I'll go on to do what I really love, which was, at that point it was organization design, people strategy work. And I got into the HR field. But very early on in my career, even when I started my career, I knew that I wanted to be a CHRO.
Your father sounds like a very special leader. And that's not like the attributes that you just described, I think are not common enough. But obviously you had a great example of what great leadership looked like. And so it's easy to embody that.
Yeah, and my favorite phrase is, you can't be what you can't see, right? And very early on in my life, I could see someone very close to me, my parent, who was in a very senior leadership role. So it was a path that I didn't think would be a problem. It was a natural path for me. I didn't even think about, I didn't question the fact, can I be a C-level executive? No, it was like almost natural. It was something that was a given. And when I talk to women now that I mentor, it isn't natural for a lot of people, right? So, one of the big areas of passion for me is to make sure that I'm giving back. I want to make sure that I am seen as an executive, so other women, people of color, underrepresented groups who don't see people like me can see it and know that it's possible, to be in a C-level role.
It's so important. And I love the example that you're setting. And, similar to what you just described, I didn't have parents that were in those types of roles. My parents owned a small business and, they were hard workers and showed up every day. They worked 7 days a week. And, I learned grit. I learned, you have to work hard. And so I took away a lot of really great learnings, but I think I struggled with my own identity as I built my professional career because this wasn't anything I saw. So to your point, it is so important that we all be more visible and present because that's the inspiration that a lot of folks do need. We don't all have that at home.
Absolutely. And also to learn what we can from our parents. I love your grit and resilience story, right? And hard work. It's really, really important. And those are important attributes that I want to instill for sure in my daughter, but also, as a role model to other women in coming up the ranks into C-level roles.
Absolutely. All right. So now let's pivot here because I know that no path to the top is easy. Right. And I know that I've heard so many crazy and interesting stories. So I want to explore some of that with you. When you think about your rise to the top, what are some of those challenges or obstacles that you faced and how did you overcome them?
So many. But what I'll start off saying, through my career, especially the early part of my career, even now, being the outsider was the norm for me. I grew up in Mumbai, as I said, but I went to do my advanced masters in HR to Australia. So I moved from Bombay to Sydney at the ripe young age of 20 with $500 in my pocket, and I had to get a scholarship, I had to pay for rent, all of that great stuff, and that was a very interesting move for me. But moving to a country where I didn't know anyone, and I clearly was an outsider. I was not Australian. I'd come from India. It made me really work really hard to produce outcomes rather than just focus on doing stuff. I was really laser focused on what can I prove to be better than I would have wanted to be in a situation where I had everybody who looked like me and felt like me, right? And it was hard. I remember it was so hard initially because I spoke, even language is very interesting because I spoke English at home. So I had an advantage going to Australia. I spoke English. So I didn't come, it wasn't my second language, but I spoke it with an accent. I wasn't Australian, right? And it wasn't at that point in time when I went to Australia, I wasn't very well accepted to speak English with another accent. So the amount of times at university and then when I went into the workplace, people would say, "What did you just say? I didn't understand you." And I'm like, that's
Mm.
very interesting because I'm very clear when I speak. I'm speaking English. I just speak it with another accent. So, those were the initial signs of, as I call it, not being inclusive, right?
Yep.
When you're pointing out all of the differences versus leveraging the commonalities. So, very earlier on, now when I look back, I learned to cope by speaking more with an Australian accent. So when I listen back to what I used to do, I used to speak on podcasts, and I had my own radio show in Australia on the national radio channel. I sounded like an Australian because that's the way I was coping, right? And I
Oh,
didn't even know. And I remember my mom coming to visit me and said, she heard me talking on the phone and she said, "Wow, you speak very differently here than you speak in India." I was
interesting.
like, so it's one thing she pointed out to me. And over the years, as you get more confident and you know more about yourself and you feel confident in your own identity, I've really become very confident in how I speak and how I come across. And it might not be the accent in the country in which I'm located, but the language is the same, for example, right? But it's also, these are small things that create a sense of not feeling like you belong. And it's something that I'm very focused on with people who work with me and in organizations that I create culture for. That it takes all sorts of individuals to come in and create greatness, right? Greatness comes from diversity.
Well, let's talk about that because obviously before we recorded, we were chatting and, you shared a specific story with me about diversity in your early careers. I believe that was in finance and banking. Hi, guys. I want to share a bit about an organization that I support called Wednesday Women. They're on a mission to increase the visibility of executive women leaders that you should know, learn from, and be inspired by. On LinkedIn, they share the profile of two amazing women each week, on Wednesdays, of course. And now just imagine if we all followed, amplified, and nominated the women that we want to see more of. Their initiative provides examples of women CEOs, founders, sales executives, technical leaders, and so many more. By supporting Wednesday Women, you'll see more of these professionals in your social feeds, of course, but also on stages, podcasts, and panels. If you're interested in learning more and supporting their initiative, head over to www.wednesdaywomen.org or follow them on LinkedIn. How do you feel like diversity played a part in some of those later challenges you had professionally?
I think the specific example I shared, but it's something that has always stuck with me when I'm coaching other women in senior roles. I started my career in banking in Australia, which was very, very, I had a monoculture in leadership roles, right? There were white men in all of the rooms that I went into, whether it's a boardroom, executive rooms. And 99% of the time, I was the only person of difference, whether it's a person of color or a woman. And I got used to it. I didn't even think about it at that point. I remember, in hindsight is 2020, right? I remember feeling, oh, I need to be like these people, so I need to morph who I am to make sure that I feel included in the room that I'm in, and that manifested itself in in various ways, right? The way I actually approached a conversation, whether it was more assertive or whether it was, I wanted to be heard in the way they wanted to hear me. So using
Right.
certain language, all of that stuff, right? But I did know that I wasn't 100% myself. I wasn't being authentic in the way I was coming across. And I was trying to be accepted. It was something that was there in the back of my mind, but never really knew it. When it came to a forefront for me was when I was being poached by a tech company, and a small tech company that all of us know, Cisco, called me and said, "Hey, there's a role, and we'd love for you to consider it." And I was actually really happy in my role at that time with the bank that I'm talking about. But I said, "Okay, let me just talk to them." And what struck me through that process was everybody who interviewed me was different. I had so much diversity in the interview panel. Nobody was the same as somebody else, And I was, it really struck me that people in leadership, people in, potentially would be part of my team, the customer base was so diverse. And I said, here's an organization that I think I can thrive and be myself and be my 100% authentic self in, And that's why I made the decision to join Cisco, and I had the best 10 years of my career with Cisco. I spent 10 years with them and moved several countries. I've lived and worked in 8 countries now. And all with my employers, everyone moving me around, not only Cisco, but other employers. And it was a great run and such a good decision for me to have made. And in hindsight, when I look back, I'm like, wow, I was, wise beyond my years at that point in my career to have done that, because I didn't actually know exactly what I was doing. But it was such a game changer for me and how I show up as a leader, how I am as a human being, as an HR professional, and as a leader. Very, very good move. So important for us to think about, are we being ourselves? Are we bringing our most authentic self to the table? And if we are not, go to another room. You don't need to be in that room. You can, often we're like focused on changing the room. Absolutely. That's important. Changing the composition of the room is also super important. And, if there is another room that feels like, hey, these people are where I can be my authentic self and I'll leverage my diversity, do that.
I think it's such a powerful story. And I think as companies think about hiring, right, which hopefully we'll get back to hiring again soon. The thing that you called out about the interview panel and the diversity that you saw there, I shared a story as I was a leader at another company. The leadership team was actually, it was just for a sales role. And unfortunately at the time, the sales leadership role and a lot of the sales members of the sales team were all white men. And so they really wanted to focus on diversity. We had a wonderful people leader there as well. And they were very intentional about including me in that panel because they're like, we want a woman, especially a woman leader, and I'm a Hispanic woman. Like, we want to bring diversity to the panel, especially when we're interviewing female candidates, because to your point earlier, right, you cannot be what you cannot see. And so I didn't realize at the time, but how critical it was to changing the dynamic and then the organization, the face of the organization, literally, just because they were out diversifying the interview panel. So I just think that that's so powerful to hear your story about that and how that really pivoted the trajectory of your career. You went on to go work at Cisco, despite being very happy where you were, because it was creating a different experience for you that opened your eyes to what could be.
Absolutely. And create a sense of belonging, right? I strongly believe, we talked about belonging earlier. It's the thing that will be the game changer for any organization in the future and today, even. But I think we've had a fractured relationship with employees with all of the layoffs in tech over the last couple of years. Hard. And people are feeling like, hey, do I really want to be in this environment? We've called our companies families. We're not a family. We're a community that comes together, right? We have to make a distinction. We don't fire our family members. So we're a community that come together. And when we come together, we need to create a safe space and a sense of belonging. And I think that companies are able to do that will be the ones that actually outperform the ones that don't.
I think that is such a wonderful point. And I love the repositioning of the sense of community, because you're right? We're not a family. And the companies that try to use that messaging, it doesn't have a great connotation for employees, right? Because to your point, family members don't treat family members certain ways that we know as companies. It's a part of doing business. And, while we want to say it's not personal, it's business, it is personal. But how do you make employees feel like a joint union? And using the term community, I think, is really a powerful mental shift for folks.
Yeah, I mean, you call your company a family, and after you've had your 13th layoff, it's kind of,
yeah, it takes on different meaning, for sure.
Yes, exactly.
Well, listen, I know that obviously you wouldn't be where you are if you didn't have tremendous success along the way as well. And I always talk about this. I feel like as women, we don't spend enough time reflecting back on the impact that we've made throughout our journey. And I'm big on let's celebrate our successes, because we just don't often enough. So we're going to pause for a moment and we're going to go back in time. And I want you to reflect and think about all of the impact that you've made. And so when you think about your journey, what are some of those proud moments or those big accomplishments that you've had?
I think as a leader, let me start as a leader. My the greatest pride and joy that I get is to see other people who I mentor and coach or sponsor. I like to draw the distinction between a mentor and a sponsor. A sponsor is someone that is deeply invested in your career. And I have been deeply invested in careers of people who've worked with me through the years. Um, and seeing them succeed and take on C-level roles, senior leadership roles, do what they thought that they didn't have the capability to do, when I first started working with them, brings me the most joy, without a doubt. And I have so many examples of that happening in my network and my career. The one thing that I will say is relationships are super important to me. So, whether it's someone that I've worked with 25 years ago, and in fact, an interesting tidbit is, so, the lady who hired me into my first role into that bank that I talked about in Australia 25 years ago was just came to visit me from Australia for the last 4 days. She stayed with me.
I love that. Talk about building real relationships, Suni.
Because she wanted to come and see my daughter and spend time with me. So she was with me for 4 days. And that is something that is a thread in my career, and something that comes quite naturally to me. It's not something that I have to dedicate a lot of time and effort to. It's something that just comes naturally. I talk about your strengths and your talents, right? And some of the things that come naturally to you are the ones that you need to leverage and become your superpowers. And I didn't know that at the time through my career, but now looking back, the relationships are what have really sustained me and helped me grow and get to the position that I'm in currently. But also it makes me want to give back. And what gives me the most joy and pride is developing other leaders and seeing them in senior roles.
I love that. Now, it's so funny. It's a common theme that I've seen across all of the folks that we've had as guests on the podcast, but everyone talks about the people part of their work, right? And the impact that they've had on others. And I think it's just a huge testament to being a really impactful leader, right? Being a leader in general. And then hearing the stories, it's so selfless in the sense that you're not sitting here talking about all of your personal successes and the great, cool things you've probably done, but the impact that you've had on others and the relationships that you've been able to foster over time. And so I think it's just a huge testament to the type of leader that you are.
Oh, well, thank you. I think that it's also about people who have, I've been lucky to have been surrounded by people who are, invested in creating true relationships and connections, because that's another game changer. When I talk about belonging, it's also connections, right?
It's a wonderful point. Now, listen, I know that you're already doing some of this in your current organization, and you've already kind of woven this theme into your journey in our conversation today. But one of my favorite sayings is empowered women empower women. And I love to see that it is now becoming on trend to have women celebrating other women. And it's definitely a culture shift from where I think it was at one point I've seen. So I'd love to hear more about what you're doing to empower other women, especially as they think about taking on leadership roles.
Wow, there's so many things. I think about it in so many different continuums, and where I start is what conversations do we have with our little girls growing up? Are we making sure that we are giving the same opportunities to all of the kids in our environment, right? So STEM. Education for women and little girls is super important for me to sponsor and develop. So, I'm on a nonprofit board that does that here, but I also support a girls' school in India, because that's really important to me. In one of our villages, because in India, it's very hard for folks to get access to education. And often parents make a decision to educate the boys over the girls, because that's the way a societal pressure works. So I was very keen that I wanted to sponsor a girls' school, and this is something that my mom and I started a long time ago, and I continue the legacy. So what I want to say is that it starts from a very young age, right? So Sometimes we think about fixing the problem at a later stage, and we need to start really early. So that's an area of passion for me. But then through the life cycle of your career, another important stat is over 50% of graduates at MIT are women. Over
Wow.
50%. I think the number
I
is about
didn't
54%.
realize.
Yep. And then when you look at the representation at the C-suite level, what happens to
Hmm.
that? What are the numbers, and where what's going on? Why are why are women dropping out of the workforce? So it's also creating a community and creating mechanisms for women to actually stay in the workforce, right? Making sure that employers, when you think about us being a community, are supportive of that, right? And when you think about benefits programs, how are your benefits programs actually enabling that? Whether it's childcare, whether it's parental care, whether it's elder care, at all the stages of your life journey. How do we as employers enable that for women to stay in the workforce, right, and not drop out? Because we are not seeing the funnel actually at a lower level, like when girls are just born, might be a little iffy, because we tend to have girls gravitate into different careers. But if you think about encouraging STEM education at a younger age, and then you think about the fact that, okay, MIT, this is a great stat, something that I was researching recently. I'm like, okay, it's working. Women are going into STEM careers in education, but then they're dropping off at some point. So how do we support the whole life cycle and the life journey? And something that I've done personally innumerable amount of times, being an HR leader, I've had a lot of women on my team. And the amount of times I've had conversations with women who've had a baby and said, and they come to me and say, Suni, I can't come back. And I'm like, no, you're coming back. We're going to support you. We're going to do whatever we can to support you. And of course, it's a choice that they can make. But often, 9 times out of 10, when I talk about being supportive and giving, making sure that we are tailoring our support to their specific need, in some cases, it's, okay, come back 3 days a week. In some cases, it's working, a shorter day initially,
Yep.
to help with the back into the workplace. So it's also tailoring your solutions to make sure that you're supportive of women coming back, and then progressing the career right through C-suite.
I think it's such an interesting point that you make, and I'm gonna be a little vulnerable myself here and share a story. But my daughter, who's now 16, who I'm also very proud to say, she is a STEM girly, so she is a math and science girl, and like wants to go and explore that as she goes on to college. So super excited that we have been able to foster that at home. But the story that you just kind of talked about, when I was I won't say early in my career, so I would say like early 30s though, as I started to see a career trajectory where leadership was really starting to take shape, I had to make a cognizant
Yeah.
decision because my daughter is my stepdaughter. So she was my daughter from my husband's first marriage, but we've raised her at home. And so we don't use the word step in this house. She is my daughter. I'm her mom. And I made a decision to focus on my career, and I didn't think that I could actually do both. And so I had to have a tough
Mm.
conversation with myself and decided not to pursue building my own family with my husband, having my own children, because I was terrified that if I did, it would set me back and that I wouldn't get the same opportunities, or I wouldn't be able to come back and still continue on that trajectory. And so I think that that's like a real fear that folks have, or a decision that they're making. And so to your point, when you're having conversations with women that go off and start their families, then come back, and they're at odds, right? They're at this crossroads of what should I do? I can't do both, or it's so hard. I love that you're trying to build environments that enable them to do both and support them to do both, because we need women to have these opportunities. We don't want them walking away from them. And I hope that no other woman makes the decision that I did, or thinks that that's the decision they have to make, because it doesn't need to be one or the other.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing that. That's wonderful that you did that, because it really shines light on what we need to do to be collectively more supportive of women, right, as a society. And sometimes we actually bark up the wrong tree. We're thinking that we need to, provide all these mechanisms at work to, and avenues for women to have conversations, but we're actually not being supportive about the times in their career and their life journey that it needs to happen, right? And for me, I had a child very late in my career, and being a C-level woman with a young child, I often get asked, how is it that you're in such a senior role, such a demanding role, and have such a young child? And I often think, would you ever ask a man that question?
Right. Never.
It would never
Never.
come up.
It would never. It's not even a thought that would ever cross anyone's mind.
Yeah, and I don't think that people are being, naturally discriminatory. It's just something societal norm for us to think through. But I think it's important for us to ask to ask ourselves these tough questions, right? And to actually respond to them in a way that brings awareness and brings collective accountability for us as a society and a community.
I couldn't agree more. This is probably the most important part of our conversation today, is just this little part, because to your point, it's a really important topic. And I think we can all be a little bit better about, the environments that we're creating to foster a different outcome. Well, now you started to touch on this conversation of, being an executive woman, being a mom to a young daughter. We talk about this often, about this concept of balance. And I don't know about you. I actually don't believe that balance is real. I think it's prioritization, right? But at some time in your life,
Yes.
things are going to take a back seat and other things will take a front seat, but you're never going to find a world that is perfectly balanced. And so as you think about your life, right, you've got this massive responsibility professionally, you have a family that you're growing at home. How do you create the appropriate balance for yourself, and so that you're serving both sides of this?
Ruthless prioritization, and focusing on the important, not on the urgent. In my role, things are urgent all the time. Like, there are fires to be fought all the time. Hey, Suni, this is happening. That's going on. Like, we need you here. But being, really, really purposeful about what you spend your time and your energy on, and what your purpose and your goal is, and being clear about that in an organizational setting, but also in a personal setting, right? I always say choosing a manager is probably more important than choosing a shrink. The right manager, right? The right manager. So I've been really focused on doing that through my career. And when I've actually let that drop and not let that be that important, it's been a problem. It's come back to bite me, right? So I've learned that focusing on working with and for the right people is really important. That's professionally. But personally, also choosing a life partner, the right life partner, is really,
completely
really
underrated, right? Who you choose to build a life with makes all the difference.
It makes all the difference, right? In my personal situation, my partner is so supportive, and he's someone that is, my daughter's primary caregiver. I will always say, because she gravitates towards him. He loves that role. It's his role, and I love my daughter, immensely, as you can imagine. But I also love my job. So it's important for me to keep that balance, and my partner is really supportive of that. So I think, finding the right manager, finding the right environment to thrive, and finding personally the right life partner is super important. Those two things that, you cannot underestimate the value of both. And also then being really clear and purposeful about what you prioritize, and then making some really key decisions. In my case, we talked about music being such a big passion for me. Right now in my life, I can't afford the time to dedicate to music, whether it's singing or being part of a musical environment in any way, shape, or form, whether it's a choir or a setting, a play setting, whatever it is. But I will do that. I'll come back to it in the next couple of years. I know when my daughter's a little older, I'll find the time to do it, and it's something that I will prioritize. But I've deprioritized right now, right? So it's making those decisions, be really purposeful about the decisions you make, rather than just happening to you.
I think that's really an important really an important point there. And so it's something we all need to consider. So you hit on something that I think is also something I want to explore a little bit further, which is advice that you wish you had had earlier, because it may have changed an outcome for you. So when you look back at your career, what's something that you wish you had heard or learned earlier that may have changed your outcome?
Man, your career is a journey. It's not a destination. That is a phrase that I've always thought about, that I wish someone told me earlier on in my career, because I was so hard charging, very early on in my career, and didn't focus enough on things outside work very earlier on, right? And the realization dawned on me much later, but I wish I had that advice, from mentors and coaches and managers and leaders and, family, that I would listen to. That's another issue. Someone that I would respect enough to listen
Right.
to. I will always say that to folks that I coach and mentor now. Don't sweat the small stuff. I remember getting so upset about a promotion that I didn't get that I thought I deserved. I was so upset about a performance rating that I got that I didn't deserve. And I beat myself up so much about it that I didn't take the time to enjoy what I was achieving through my journey, and enjoy all of the wonderful opportunities I had to travel and to live in different countries and to meet new people all through work, right? And to form bonds and relationships that are global now, I wish I'd done more of that.
I love that. I think it's such like an important point to hit on, is that it is about the journey, right? I think so often we're so hyper focused on the next title, that next role, the next step, and just we're so overly focused on the goals that we set for ourselves that we forget about the experiences and the learnings and just enjoying the ride. And it's, oftentimes things go missed. So I love that you've shared that. Well, I know as we start to round down this episode, I want to make sure that we are leaving our listeners with a little bit more, because you already gave so much. This was probably one of my favorite episodes by far, Suni. But before we wrap up today, what's one thing you want our listeners to take away with them?
At all phases in your career, whether you're a leader or an individual contributor or whatever role you play in an organization, be a multiplier. I strongly believe being a multiplier is what will build community and build connections around us. So amplify people, including yourself, and amplify strengths and superpowers. And don't be focused on the things that you're not so good at. We're hyper-focused on the things that we're not so good at. But if we are hyper-focused on our strengths and just make them absolute superpowers, that's going to be a game changer for not only ourselves, but people around us. So be a multiplier is my advice.
And I don't think that there is better advice that we can wrap up today with. So Suni, thank you so much for your time. Your journey is so inspiring. I walked away feeling like I should have been taking notes this whole time, because I've got things that now I want to apply as I think about my journey as a leader. But I'm just so grateful for you taking the time and sharing all that with us.
Thank you for having me, Kristi. Thank you. It was wonderful. Lovely conversation. I've enjoyed it so much.
Thank you. Well, for everyone listening, if you've enjoyed this episode, please rate and follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, subscribe on YouTube, and connect with me on LinkedIn. Until next time, we'll see you soon. Hi guys, I want to share a bit about an organization that I support called Wednesday Women. They're on a mission to increase the visibility of executive women leaders that you should know, learn from, and be inspired by. On LinkedIn, they share the profile of 2 amazing women each week, on Wednesdays of course. And now just imagine if we all followed, amplified, and nominated the women that we want to see more of. Their initiative provides examples of women CEOs, founders, sales executives, technical leaders, and so many more. By supporting Wednesday Women, you'll see more of these professionals in your social feeds, of course, but also on stages, podcasts, and panels. If you're interested in learning more and supporting their initiative, head over to www.wednesdaywomen.org or follow them on LinkedIn.